Hello and a very warm welcome. My name's David Roth from WPP, and it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to Follow the Sun, 24 hours of broadcasting right across the world to celebrate the launch of the WPP BAV Best Country Study for 2021, done in conjunction with US News and the Wharton Business School. It's a pleasure to have you join us for this section. Of course, this broadcast is going to be right across the world. We're starting in Australia and New Zealand, and we'll be ending at the end of the 24-hour period in the USA. Well, we've got an absolutely packed broadcast today, and I'd like to start off by introducing Mike Sussman from BAV. Mike has been the brainchild behind the Best Country Studies for many years, and there's nobody better to put the Best Country Study into context. Over to you, Mike.
Thank you, David. We're really excited about the launch of the 2021 Best Countries study. It's the most comprehensive study of the power of nation brands. We've been doing this for 6 years, covering countries that represent 95% of the global GDP and about 75% of the world's population. So an amazing coverage. This year, we're looking at 78 countries. We spoke to over 17,000 business decision makers, citizens, and elites around the world. And we've ranked countries on a battery of metrics, including 26 key rankings that we'll talk about throughout this report and throughout the app. One thing we've seen over time is the shifting impact of soft power. It's becoming more and more important to driving the power of a country, while hard power, like banks and tanks, as we call it, the more traditional power, is becoming less impactful on the success of a nation. When we think about the power of a nation, we think about 10 key dimensions, and you can look at each of these ranks and how a country does on these things, from entrepreneurship to cultural influence to quality of life. We've introduced 2 new ones that are becoming more and more important today in these changing dynamics of culture. One of those is how socially purposeful is a nation. And the second is how agile is a nation, how responsive is to things, particularly during a COVID era. And both of those dimensions are extremely important in driving the GDP and the success of a nation. Agile nations are seen as 3 times more likely to be a better job market. They're rated 3.2 times more likely as being economically influential. They are more connected to the rest of the world. So agile nations are doing something to resonate with people globally. Really important to mention, and it's the biggest driver now of GDP. And that's something that the nations need to be more and more of today. So when you think about agility, the top nations around the world this year are USA, number 1 in terms of being an agile country, followed by Australia, and in 3rd place is Canada. We continue to see the rising power of purpose, not just for brands, but also for nations. In fact, purposeful nations are 57% more likely to be considered for tourism, 55% more likely to be considered as a place to do business. So it's important to be seen as a purposeful and socially responsible country. Number 1 on this purposeful dimension is Canada, followed by Denmark, and 3rd place is New Zealand out of 78. So pretty impressive, pretty strong dimensions, very important. We also see the power and impact of brands that resonate from countries. In fact, 79.5% of citizens say that consumer brands play an important role in defining a country's culture. So there's a strong relationship between the brands and the nation. We also see that 78.6% of citizens say that the country a product is made in impacts their preference for a brand. So you can see that interplay between brand and country and how important it is today. And we started measuring the power of what does it mean to be made in a specific country. What does made in America mean, and made in China? And we can rank the power of these nations in terms of their exports. So, for instance, Germany ranks number 1 in terms of the country you'd want to buy an automobile from. They also dominate on pharmaceuticals and beer. So you can see a little bit of a balanced power of that nation. Italy is number 1 on fashion. So that's the top brand for when you're thinking about buying fashion brands. France owns cosmetics. In terms of the best countries for real estate, Canada ranks number 1, followed by the United States and then France. So overall, again, you can see how the building blocks of a nation affect its overall ranking. And we're excited to share some more details with you. Back to you, David.
Well, now it's time to get an overview of the key insights from the 2021 study on a global perspective. And who better to do that for us than Professor David Ribstein from Wharton University. Professor Ribstein has been our partner in this study since it started, and his unique understanding and unique perspective of countries, of brands, and what's driving GDP growth is unrivaled. So let's hear from David now.
Hello, I'm Dave Ribstein. I'm a marketing professor at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. I've been involved with the Best Country Study since its inception. This year has been a different year. It's been a transformational year. There's been many things that have affected how we view countries and how we live our particular lives. First and foremost, obviously, we've had to deal with the COVID-19 and the tragic loss of millions of lives all around the world. Accompanying this has been the huge impact on economies of various different countries, leading to an overall global recession. Some countries have handled the pandemic well, such as South Korea and Taiwan and several others, whereas other countries have not handled it nearly as well. Accompanying this pandemic has been the subsequent vaccine distribution. And this has required acquisition of vaccines as well as some form of equitable distribution of those. Perhaps Israel has been the country that has done the best at it. There are others that are catching up, but there are other countries that are still struggling today with trying to manage the vaccine distribution. A third major thing that's been happening this year has been the Black Lives movement that originated in the United States and has found it in various other countries all around the world. Climate impact has been a major event that's happened in various different countries. Perhaps the most notable are the brush fires that happened in Australia. We've seen other events, such as the explosions that happened in the Beirut port, killing millions of lives. And of course, we could not ignore Brexit and the impact that's had on the British economy, as well as the economies of Europe. Many, many events have made this year an exceptional year. And it's part of what it is that we've all had to adjust to. Perhaps the greatest impact, of course, has been the pandemic. And what we have witnessed as individuals is we see that how we buy and where we shop, that's changed. How we work, many of us working from home, some of us not having jobs. So there's been a dramatic impact for individuals, where we eat and how we interact with family and friends, dramatically affected, and we've had to adapt. Businesses have had to adapt as well. And what they have had to do is how they connect with their customers has changed. Meetings have changed. The ability to have trade shows dramatically affected. The whole supply chain has been disrupted. And certain industries, such as the hospitality industries or the airline industry, have been dramatically affected, with sporting events being canceled throughout the world. So many industries have suffered as a result. And when I've talked to business leaders, almost inevitably, what it is that they tell me is they've needed to be agile. And it sort of is the buzzword that I hear from companies. But that's not restricted to just individuals and companies. Countries have had to adapt as well. And what it is that we have seen is we see, obviously, trying to get the healthcare systems up to speed and handling with this medical crisis that we've got. And getting medical supplies to the hospitals and to individuals has also been an issue. But trying to cope with the unemployment levels and trying to deal with that and supporting the local governments has been a major issue for countries all around the world. And what countries have had to do they've had to adapt as well. Well, we too at the Best Country Study have had to go through our own adaptations. We've added 13 new attributes that we use for evaluating countries, and we have taken one of the previous dimensions, that of citizenship, and we have morphed it into a dimension that we call social purpose. And what is social purpose? It has many of the dimensions that we had in citizenship, but it also includes dimensions such as human rights and racial equality and social justice and climate concern that have all been attributes that now feed into the social purpose dimension. And we've added a new dimension. And this new dimension, this new overall factor is one of course, agility. And what is it that we have feeding into agility? Our perceptions of countries in terms of their adaptability and in terms of responsiveness and how progressive they are and how modern they happen to be and how dynamic they are, all feed into this agility dimension. So with that said, let's take a look at the latest rankings that we have.
Shalom, everybody. I'm Gilad from Mediacom Israel. Well, Israel is ranked number 30th in the world. We're actually down one place versus last year's study. But we don't really care because our highest ranking is on power, driven mainly by military power, where we're ranked number 4. So don't mess with us, and you better fix our overall ranking by next year. I thought the best person to talk about perceptions of power and Israel's ranking on this construct would be Gary Bryant. Gary is executive director of strategy at Lander and Fitch in London. And we had the opportunity to work together on a project for an Israeli military and defense company called IAI this year, Israel Aerospace Industries. Thought it would be interesting to hear Gary's viewpoint on Israel's ranking. Let's check if he's home.
So I thought the best person to talk about power and the ranking that Israel got would be Gary Bryant, Executive Director of Insight and Strategy with Lander and Fitch in London. And Gary and myself had a chance to work together this year for a project for an Israeli military and defense company, IAI, Israel Aerospace Industries. So I thought it would be interesting to get an outsider's view from Gary on this high ranking that Israel got on power. Hi, Gary.
Good to see you again, Gilad. Really excited to talk about this one.
Yeah, good to see you. So I actually wanted to put here this because I think it's kind of interesting. You know, if you look at the global map, going back to something that former Israeli President Shimon Peres said that perceptions of power are more important than power itself. And I thought that by looking at the map, it's clear what he was saying. And I wanted to ask you, isn't it absurd that such a tiny country, in essence, gets this high ranking of power?
It does strike one as quite strange that, you know, a country of a little over 8.2 million, I think, is the population. It's tiny. I mean, I come from South Africa. I think the whole of Israel can fit inside the Kruger National Park for us, which, you know, is just a national reserve. So it does strike one as really strange that such a small place can have such an outsized influence in the world. But there's very definitely truth to it. I think, as you mentioned, there's a lot going on in Israel. And if you tend to look at the news, the things you're going to hear about Israel generally has got something to do with violence on one of the borders, be it the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, something's going on there, or there's politics. And that's sort of the prevailing narrative, I guess, to the rest of the world when you actually think about Israel and what you hear about them. And I guess that military aspect of it definitely plays an overarching role within Israel, and anyone who vaguely knows the history of the state will know that it's been involved in some major conflicts where it's prevailed. The Six-Day War, Yom Kippur War are probably two that really stand out, and it always prevails, and it's very definitely around the world known as a serious military power. And I think the vast majority of nations on earth would think twice if they had to in any way antagonize Israel, because it's definitely not a military that you want to come up against. And that gives it this fearsome power despite its size. It's definitely not someone you want to trifle with.
Good to know. So I'll just you know, again, we mentioned this power construct, which is built up of separate factors, and the most influential one for Israel was military power. But if you look at single attributes, according to the best countries ranking, one could see that religion is quite high. And I'll tell you, I'm seeing an issue here, because religion combined with military power really affects our ranking on sexiness. We're number 78 in the world. which is quite low, or maybe even the lowest. And I guess this combination of, walking around with a Stremel and a big gun doesn't really do good to your sexiness. But I didn't even know that sexiness is measured on for countries. Any advice on how Israel could improve its sexiness factor given the situation?
Well, yeah, as you say, there's definitely a big contrast between military and sexiness, I guess, unless you're someone who's really into your guns. I think as a country, and having visited there for the first time, one possibly gets a bit of a false perception of what Israel really is, because of, and again, I want to go back to that power construct, and how it comes across in the news. That's what you prevailingly see, and it is a country essentially built on defense, and I think that's an important aspect to talk about as well. And I'm going to get to sexiness, I promise you. But I think something really important that really struck me is it's actually a defense-minded nation and not an attack-minded nation. I think I was in some way shocked that it's almost a daily occurrence that somebody is lobbing a bomb across the border. You do hear about it when it's significant in the news, but it's almost a daily occurrence. And Israel has built systems, and I think just about everybody in the world has heard of Iron Dome, whether they're into anything military or not, they've heard of it. And it's a hugely powerful system to protect the state of Israel and the people in there. So I think that's something people kind of need to remember, and that definitely again plays into that power space of what you do. But amazingly, because that is there, the freedom, I had actually expected in getting there that it would feel like a dangerous place, that something was going to land on your head at any point in time, that there would be military people around you all the time. I think one of the other things that sort of people know generally is everybody in Israel goes through the army, be they male or female, which it's not something you see in many countries. So I'd sort of expected it to be military people all over, guns protecting everywhere. And it really wasn't. It just was extremely down to earth, cosmopolitan, people going about their daily lives, seemingly without a care in the world. And I think coming back to the sexiness piece, that's the bit, if Israel wants to work on that, and maybe being sexy will make you a bigger target, I'm not sure. So it's better to rather look powerful if you're wanting to keep people out. But I think there's really something special about the cosmopolitan nature. It's a massively active, as say you go out in the morning, 7 a.m. Before then, everybody's out on the beach, they're running, exercising, really outdoors, active freedom. The food's fantastic. It's a very plugged in, digitally savvy nation. And I think perhaps, where the challenge is, there is this amazing perception of power, again, going back to the fact that 80% of the news is either to do with a military conflict or politics, which are really the major constructs around that. And maybe Israel's got to work a little bit harder to talk about the other aspects of the incredible food, the wonderful weather. There's a lot of great beaches. And I think there's another side to Israel that's maybe not necessarily known to the rest of the world. And you're obviously wanting to move up the rankings, of course. And I think starting to show a bit of a different face, that this is not just a defense-minded nation that unfortunately hasn't been able to choose a government for the last 2 years. But there's other really cool stuff going on there. The startup scene is incredible. The amount of innovation going on is off the charts. And I think those aspects of Israel can really help to get the country seen in a better way. And I think maybe focusing a little bit more on the soft power aspects, rather than necessarily just the hard power aspects, is what's going to go there, because it's true. And when we think about brands, we always want to come from a point of authenticity. And I think there's a huge amount of truth in the fact that there's a lot more to Israel than initially meets the eye.
Wow, great. I'm happy to hear you're optimistic on our potential in terms of ranking and overall, and I completely agree with you. Gary, thank you very much. A really fresh perspective, and was really happy to have you here. And looking forward to our continued work.
Great. Thank you, Gilad. Hope you have a good day and enjoy the sunshine.
Thank you. You too. Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye.
another award-winning work that we did this year that is, again, at the crossroads of religion and culture is work that we did for P&G's Always, Feminine Hygiene. And it's called The First Ever Virtual Bat Mitzvah. And I thought the best person to talk about it would be our very own Dana Volsfeld. Hi, Dana.
Hello.
So Dana heads our strategy and data, and was an instrumental part of this campaign. And Dana, could you tell us a little bit about the background to this initiative?
Sure, absolutely. So for those who don't know, a bat mitzvah is actually a rite of passage for young teens at around 12 years old, and is celebrated in the Jewish faith. And unfortunately, due to COVID, many bat mitzvahs were canceled or delayed, which was quite upsetting for these young teens. And what Always did is organize the very first and the very biggest virtual bat mitzvah online, with thousands of teens participating and celebrating their rite of passage bat mitzvah together. It came at a wonderful opportunity for the brand as well, because teens are considered our point of market entry audience, and we were kind of stagnant in those ages. We weren't really able to get a lot of teens to relate to Always, so that kind of created an uplift of the trend for teens and Always. It was very, very good timing in that aspect. And we were also able to tap into this national, cultural, and very personal event that really resonated with these teens.
Great. Thanks, Dana. Let's watch the case video together to see how it went.
A bat mitzvah is a once-in-a-lifetime event, a Jewish rite of passage, celebrated with family and friends when a girl turns 12. But when COVID-19 hit, all plans and celebrations were ruined.
תכננתי אותה חצי שנה מראש. דיברתי עם אמא, היא אמרה שאין מה לעשות.
Like the rest of the world, Israel entered a severe lockdown. This is the story of how Always came through for these young girls by organizing the first ever virtual bat mitzvah. Girls' confidence plummets at puberty, and the chaos created by the virus only added to it.
היה לי ממש קשה לקבל את זה שהבת מצווה מותרת. התבאסתי, התאכזבתי.
Always' mission has long been to rebuild teen girls' confidence. We wanted to prove to them that while there are sometimes things we can't control in life, one should never give up. Together with Shavit, a nonprofit dedicated to teen fempowerment, we would organize a bigger, better, and much more exciting celebration for every girl who missed her event, to bring back her joy, optimism, and self-confidence. A social media video invite built anticipation for the event.
ראיתי את זה באינסטגרם ודי התלהבתי.
PR spread the word further.
ארגון שוות יחד עם Always הפיקו אתמול בת מצווה וירטואלי.
הבנתי שזה לא רק אני, יש עוד הרבה בנות שבוטלו להם הבת מצווה.
And on April 22nd at 6 p.m., more than 1,400 girls logged on to mark together their bat mitzvahs. The girls, as well as family and friends, gathered to view the hottest acts, putting on a show just for them. Even the president of Israel logged on. The first ever virtual bat mitzvah turned out to also be the biggest one ever.
היה יותר מ1,000 בנות שחגיגו וזה היה ממש מטורף.
Cementing Always as the force for female good.
זה רגע שנזכור את הרבה זמן.
תודה רבה ל-Always שהצלחתם לרגש אותנו.
זה היה מרגש.
תודה רבה לעמותת שוות ול-Always שארגנו את הבת מצווה הזאת.
Lifting the spirits of not only these young girls, but of an entire nation all together.
Our next guest is Eldad Postan-Koren. He's the founder of, together with his wife, Ronnie, he's the founder of Shavot, the non-profit organization that focuses on teen girl empowerment. Shavot was the partner of Always on the virtual bat mitzvah project that you just saw. Hi, Eldad.
Hi, how are you?
Good to see you. And I thought it would be good to talk with Eldad on Israeli entrepreneurship. Israel has the construct of entrepreneurship is the number 3 strongest one for Israel. So we are perceived as an entrepreneurial country. And you're probably the best person to talk to. After all, you wrote the book, literally, about Israeli entrepreneurship. So good to have you here. But I would start by asking you in a more general manner, what is entrepreneurship? What is to be?
So I think there are many ways to define entrepreneurship. I think that the best definition that I like is the art of creating something from scratch. And I think it's very lean definition, but it grasps the essence of what is entrepreneurship.
Great. So that begs the question, is there an Israeli style of entrepreneurship? Is it different than the general?
Yeah, so I think that actually the story of Israel and my story is a very entrepreneurial story, because we as a country, as people, we suffer from lack of resources. And I think that the overall idea of entrepreneurship is how you overcome lack of resources and how you create something from scratch under the constraints of lack of resources. And I think a good example to this mindset is when I'm a naval officer, a former naval officer. And when we went to classified military operations overseas, I think one of the strongest memories were that most of the time I got like 20% of the spare parts that I needed for the battleship. And, the approach was of my commanders, this is what we get, and this is what you get, and with this, you need to win, and you need to deliver. And I think that that's a very Israeli, straightforward, aggressive or assertive way. And I think that that defines really well what Israeli entrepreneurship is.
Great. So this links also to our previous discussion on military power. Thank you, Eldad. Thank you very much. This has been great.
Thank you so
and good
much.
luck with the book. Recommend it.
Thank you. And the venture. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. So true to its Holy Land moniker, it's actually no surprise that in the Best Countries report, Israel's highest single factor ranking is on religion. And a lot of the work that we do here at MediaCom is actually taps into this crossroad between religion and culture and the tensions that are created between 5,000-year-old traditions and the startup nation, entrepreneurial culture of Israel. And I thought the best person to talk to would be our very own Michal Bartal. She's the planning lead here at MediaCom Israel, and an Orthodox religious Jewish woman at her own right. Hi, Michal.
Hi.
So the first question that I wanted to ask you, is it possible at all to coincide religion and modernity, tradition and high tech, or is it a lost battle to begin with?
אני מהווה דוגמה טובה. אני אישה יהודייה חרדית עם קריירה בפרסום, ולכן התשובה המיידית שלי היא כן, אפשר לאזן בין המצוות הדתיות לאורח החיים המודרני, אבל לא תמיד זה קל.
And I think one of the best examples of the work that we've done to portray this would be the initiative we ran for Always, the Always Rabbi Bot. It's an award-winning initiative. It won the Media Grand Prix at Eurobest, a couple of gold medals at the Festival of Media, and the Extraordinary Award for WPP in the tech category. Could you give us a little bit of a background on this initiative?
הבריף שהגיע מ-Always היה קשור לקבוצת מיעוט נשים חרדיות. בשל מגבלות אמונותן, הן לא יכולות לצרוך מדיה בערוצים מרכזיים, שאין להם טלוויזיה בבית, ובאופן כללי, הקריאייטיב הגלובלי לא מותאם עבורן. ובכל זאת, מכיוון שהן מהוות 20% מהנשים בישראל, מבחינה עסקית חשוב לפנות גם אליהן. Always הוא מותג היגיינה נשית מוביל בישראל, אך בהיעדר אפשרות להגיע למגזר החרדי, היה לנו מאוד קשה להצדיק את הפרמיה במחיר, כך שפוטנציאל נתח השוק נפגע. ב-Always העיקר תמיד הוא סביב חיזוק הביטחון העצמי בקרב נשים. בהתחלה דרך המוצר ובהמשך דרך העצמה נשית. בשיחה עם נשים חרדיות שמענו על מתחים ספציפיים העומדים בפניהם, ומכיוון שפתרונות תקשורת סטנדרטיים לא רלוונטי עבורן, בחרנו להתמקד בשירות יהודי, ספציפי, ממותג, שיקל על חייהם של הנשים האלה, של נשים חרדיות. אם תרצו, טכנולוגיה מחזקת מסורת בת 5,000 שנה.
זו סוגיה היסטורית שסוף סוף יש לה פתרון אלגנטי.
אם יש ספק, אז האישה עושה בדיקה, מעבירה אותה לרב פוסק.
יש משהו נורא מביך בזה, וזה משהו שלוקח זמן.
The genius of the app is that it enables the woman, empowers the woman to be able to check on her own without the need to bring it to an halachic expert.
אני בהלם שעד היום לא היה את הדבר הזה, וזה הקלה, דבר ראשון. זה משהו שלידי תמיד בסמארטפון שלי, גאוני.
Thanks, Michal. I think another example is our award-winning initiative for Gillette deodorants from 2018. It won in Cannes. If I remember correctly, the insight for this initiative came from your father?
כן, בארוחת ערב משפחתית אחת סיפרתי לו על כמה מהפרויקטים שאנחנו עובדים עליהם, ועולה התובנה המרכזית שבעצם בה השתמשנו בקמפיין. היא מושתתת על התובנה שאסור להתפלל בתנאי ריח לא טובים, מכיוון שזה מסיח את הדעת והכוונות האמיתיות של התפילה. באמצעות מד ריח יפני משוכלל שהבאנו, הוכחנו בפני באי בית הכנסת, מתפללי בית הכנסת, שעם ג'ילט נוגד הזיעה חזק והחדש, התפילה מובטחת ללא הסחות דעת.
Let's watch the case video for Gillette deodorants. I don't roll on Shabbos. Here we go.
Last year, we used the word of God to sell protection to 3 million Orthodox Jews. The kind of protection you need in 40-degree heat whilst dressed like this. Especially when the Sabbath rolls around. Orthodox Jews aren't allowed to do any work during the 24-hour Sabbath period. Drive, shower, even apply deodorant, which is a big problem. When they pack into synagogues for the holiday, it gets uncomfortable, sweaty, and the smell distracts them from doing what they went there to do. Pray! As God says,
"Thou shalt not pray in a place of foul odor."
Thankfully, Gillette offers 48-hour protection, which would reduce the odor in synagogues, helping God hear their prayers. But Orthodox Jews hadn't heard of Gillette. After all, they don't even shave. So, for 6 weeks, we took over every media channel used during Sabbath preparations. First, we recruited Judaism's religious authority to endorse our commandment and spread the word on the #1 media channel for the community, synagogue notice boards. Then, a side-by-side battle of the synagogues pitted our 48-hour formula against the brands usually bought by our audience. We proved Gillette's formula made our prayer 4 times more effective through a state-of-the-art Japanese odometer. And as the holiday approached, we sponsored the candle lighting schedules indicating the start time of the Sabbath. We took over the last radio commercial slot before Sabbath began, and we hijacked the street sirens that marked the start of the holy 24-hour period. The community heard our prayer. In just 2 months, we grew Gillette's share in the Orthodox community from 3% to 15%! Mazel tov!
So finally, to close the day, we have our special guest, Shimi Hamias. Hi, Shimi.
Hi, Gilad.
Shimi, this has been an extraordinary year, to say the least. I wanted to ask you, what is the most Israeli characteristic that stood out this year for you?
Well, to capture this characteristic, I have to capture an event that happened this year. I believe that there is one event that in many senses captures the craziness of this year and exemplifies what being Israeli is all about. Our vaccination rollout. A lot of people were wondering how come Israel became the first country in the world to get most of its population vaccinated. And I would say it has nothing to do with power, or at least not in the way this report defines. It has more to do with the basic DNA of every Israeli, something that might impact a lot of the cases you show today as well. Our built-in chutzpah, which is directness and persistence. Let's watch a video in which the CEO of Pfizer is asked exactly that. Why Israel? I think this is the essence of chutzpah at its best.
Let's watch the video.
You know, I think a lot of Israelis are asking themselves, why Israel? What is our secret sauce? Why have we become what you call the world's lab?
Yes, I wouldn't call it the world lab. Maybe I use this expression, and I know that some people didn't receive it well. I would call that we were looking. We knew that the deployment of the vaccine will take time around the world, and the anxiety will build even if vaccinate. So we knew that it is very appropriate for humanity to be able to select one country that we can demonstrate what the vaccination of the people can do to the health index, to the health of the people, and the economic index, because they will be able to reopen the economy. And of course, I was talking with several heads of state. I spoke to your prime minister. He convinced me that Israel is the place with the right conditions. Israel had a population that it is relatively small, 9 million people. Other countries, they have this population. They have an extraordinary healthcare system, and other countries are having also very good healthcare systems. They have a very high degree of electronic data monitoring system that 99 plus of the population is in this data. That was very convenient. Not many countries have that. But also I was impressed, frankly, with the obsession of your prime minister. He called me 30 times. 30
How many times?
He will call me 3 o'clock in the morning. Mm-hmm. And he will ask me, what about the variants? What data we have? And I said, Prime Minister, it's 3 o'clock. Said, no, don't worry, tell me. Or he would call me to ask about children. I need to vaccinate the schools. Or to ask about pregnant women. So he convinced me, frankly, that he will be on top of things. Mm-hmm. And I knew that the Israelis, they have such an experience in managing crisis because of the situation that they live, surrounded by hostile, basically, nations at a large degree, and living under, let's say, this almost constant war situation. So I felt that they can do it, and I felt that the leader was really going to guarantee that this will happen. So we placed the bet with Israel. Mm-hmm. We are so happy because the way that you executed was beyond our imagination. And now, believe me, a year from the declaration of the pandemic by the WHO, we were able today to issue a press release together with the Ministry of Health of your country about the results that I keep receiving calls from heads of state of all the countries to congratulate me because they see the hope now. They see a path to liberation.
So, great video. Shimi, your advice how to be Israeli? Be a little bit rude, a little bit impolite, as long as your intentions are good, right?
Well, not quite, but but on a good way, yes.
Thanks, Shimi. Thank you.
Thank you, Gilad.
And shalom.
Shalom.
Well, thank you all very much indeed. To celebrate this very special launch, we've created a very special app. It's a virtual reality experience where you can literally visit every single country that's featured in the 2021 study. Well, you can get it on your desktop, your laptop, your tablet, your mobile phone. All you need to do is just download it from the URL that's on the screen here. Enjoy, explore. It's full of interest and insights, and we'll be refreshing the content frequently over the course of the next few months. So please do go back frequently. Earlier, I talked about the significance of countries being seen as brands. This is being increasingly realised right across the world, not just by business leaders, but by governments at the most senior of levels. I caught up with the Prime Minister of the Netherlands and asked him how important he believes country brands are. Mr. Prime Minister, what contribution do you think that retailing makes to the economy and society in general?
So many. I mean, it is the biggest employer in the Netherlands. 900,000 people are somehow connected to the retail sector, so it is huge in its economic impact. That means that many people, in many cases young people, start their working life experiences in the retail sector. It is also a place where you can learn how to be more entrepreneurial and how to start your own business. It is a sector in our economy which is very much focused on innovation and disruptive innovation. It is very much connected to the modern economy, to the internet, to online shopping. So there are so many positives. And it's also a place where people come together. It's also a sort of community place. In some of the stores, people drink a cup of coffee, meet friends, and then buy some stuff. So it has many, many impacts on society.
Mr. Prime Minister, you had a fantastic career at Unilever. You obviously know brands very well. Do you think country brands are as important as product brands?
Oh, they're crucial. And what I found in this job is that the brand of Amsterdam, the brand of the Netherlands, the brand of Eindhoven, or the whole commercial area around cities like Zwolle and Amersfoort are crucial for our international standing. And the fact that you can bike to school as a child, that it's relatively safe here, that there are so many possibilities when you like sports or culture. And I really learned to brand that much more than we did already.
One last question, Mr. Prime Minister. What advice would you give retailers today who are under a lot of pressure, under a lot of stress? Everything's changing very fast.
Yeah, but still, at the same time, you are in a fascinating sector. So enjoy what you are doing. We live only once. This is the real thing. This is not the. So you have to make the best of it. And there are so many opportunities for good salespeople, for good businessmen and women, to make use of all those opportunities which are out there. And do realize that you play a very important part in societies. You are really part of society.
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Wow, I can't believe it. We've come to the end of our broadcast. We're almost out of time. I'd like to thank everybody who participated in today's broadcast. And just to remind you again, please do download the app and enjoy going virtually into every single one of our countries in this year's 2021 Best Countries Study. So from me, David Roth, thank you very much indeed. And Mike, thank you very much indeed as well.
My pleasure. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Thank you.
Well, have a great rest of the day. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. We really appreciate it. Bye.